Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. Tonight we're going to be getting into part 2 of our last week's episode, which was the Monday Night Wars, which is on Peacock. So we watched episode 1 last week. Today we're watching episode 2. And then we'll probably stop here just so we don't spoil anything for ourselves moving forward with our regular show. And we'll round it off with ECW next week so that we have like a full picture for our other show. But tonight we're going to be getting into mostly the rise of NWO, that is New World Order from Monday Nitro, and how that impacted WCW, WWE, and all the shenanigans in between.
Amen.
I mean, craziness. Before we get into the episode, because last week we talked about this briefly and I wanted to clarify what it was. I said I would look it up. No cut contracts. So WCW was offering no cut contracts to wrestlers. We've already talked about the fact that they were wrestling for way fewer days, which we will get into that when we talk about Razor and Diesel on today's episode. But a no cut contract is basically you are guaranteed a roster spot. Like you are basically guaranteed a spot in a main storyline during your contract, which is like a huge promise, I feel like. But a solid one, because I guess, we had kind of mentioned this last week where it's like WWE gave up Hulk, or like let him kind of fall by the wayside. And it's like, they thought Hulk was washed out, but he really wasn't. Like, was it just bad storytelling? Like, it's that kind of questions that raise. So to have a no cut contract where it's like you are like contractually obligated to be in a storyline, like that is very appealing. Like I get how that was a huge draw for people. So
Amen.
that's what a no-cut contract is.
Oh, thanks for doing the research.
Anytime. Really wild. But anyway, so this episode opens up with kind of a recap of last week, how Monday Nitro got started, the war between Vince McMahon and Ted Turner. So where we're at now is basically both networks are kind of doing an even amount of pull in terms of audience at this point. But Eric Bischoff says, Ted wanted to be number one. He was very competitive, and that's what he was willing to do. And we know from the pettiness that is Eric Bischoff, like he was willing to do anything. So
really and
he is really like a villain. Like to me, like I know that like Ted Turner gives sometimes like the president, but Eric Bischoff is like the one pulling the strings. Like he's like what's her name in Scandal? Like she's handling all the things.
Oh, I never seen Scandal, but I've
actually never seen. It's Olivia Pope. I think that's her name. I've never actually seen Scandal either, but it's amazing actress. Cannot think of her name. What is in? But her character's Olivia Pope, and she's always like cleaning up the messes, doing the things. Like Eric Bischoff gives Olivia Pope like by any means necessary kind of energy. And it's funny. So Shawn Michaels says no one was really thinking about what's going to happen. They're just excited to get their opportunity. It was everybody's ball game, meaning the wrestlers. Like none of the wrestlers were really affected by this. They were just psyched about the energy that was being created. And I think that the audience probably feels the same way.
Oh, they were so. I mean, just having another option as far as another product to watch was enough to get people just stoked.
I think that that's really been dawning on me recently is like just the choice. Like they didn't have a choice until now. Like that really is like a thing of beauty.
Right.
So
right.
If I could go back, I probably would have been, I want to say I would be like loyal to the soil, like pick my network and be like, man, like WCW
No,
sucks.
I jumped around.
I'd be a flipper, I think.
I jumped around. Yeah.
I believe it.
And what a lot of like fans ends up happening is like they like their wrestlers. Like they have their favorite wrestlers and they just kind of follow where they go.
Work. I love that. And I think that's how I would be, just thinking about it. But so in this episode, we really get into, which I'm so happy because I really didn't get to meet the real versions of Big Daddy Cool Diesel and Razor Ramon.
No, not at all.
Now.
Yes.
Because in our other show, and I'm so, so glad this episode got into fake Razor and fake Diesel, which we'll get there. But like, oh my God, like knowing something, like we got to a point in the show where like I know what's happening is crazy.
Right.
I get to actually meet Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Scott Hall being Razor Ramon, Kevin Nash being Big Daddy Cool Diesel. when I tell you these two men are their characters, like Scott Hall
Very much so.
is Razor Ramon. Like he still has the toothpick in his interview. He's got his ponytail with the hair. Like,
Oh, he's that way until till the very end, my
God,
friend, till the
what a
very end.
what a guy. I was so in love with them. So in love with them. Like all versions of them. I just think they're so amazing. But we get into them. Um, they're making huge waves in the WWE as the pair of Diesel and Razor. Kevin Nash says Scott and I were doing some pretty incredible things, and I was very, very happy. Michael Cole says that they were really the reason that WWE kept going after Hulk and Savage left. Like they were a huge draw for viewers. They were just like really doing some amazing things. Um, and it's funny because they mention a lot of Vince's creations that didn't land. So this is a, kind of a gimmick, obviously, like Razor Ramon and Diesel are gimmicks, characters, whatever. And like, but a lot of Vince's characters didn't land, but for some reason these ones did. But it's like
Right.
showing like clowns. And I mean, even think of like we have a wrestling plumber. There was like a wrestling like
There's the hockey player,
the hockey
there's like
player,
the
the
farmer, the electrician,
the the
the name and
everyday.
occupation. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, 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 fully. And it's funny, Triple H, this gagged me. He goes, it kind of felt like at some point we were just insulting people's intelligence,
Right. Like you'll just accept it. Like
which
that's
is tea. I mean, you want to see, like, he says we're giving them things that were passe, and I agree with this. I mean, like we get it. Like, okay, a plumber who wrestlers. Okay, got it. But like what's the story? Like what's he mad at the carpenter because they're both in the trade and they want to unionize? Like what's
right.
the tea here? Like I don't,
Right, right.
I want the drama. And I think that it's better to create something. Like Undertaker works because it's such a specific profession that has so much like lore and like things you can
Right.
go with, like the
Well,
urn and Paul Bear and
and
like
him being like a
who he is.
zombie or like dead. You know what I
An
mean? Like,
undead yes, like
right.
there's
There's
things there,
layers.
there's layers, yes, but like so I feel like it's almost better to just create something from scratch, really,
Right.
like that no one's seen before, because then you can, one, you have freedom to take it anywhere,
Right.
and
There
two,
are no limitations as far as like your occupation. Like,
fully, yeah,
you know
no,
what I mean?
100%. So I feel like that is just makes sense to me. But they also mentioned WCW has their own flaws. Because The Miz, again, love The Miz. What a
Love the
guy.
miss.
Love. He said it WCW just felt like I was watching the same people I watched in the 80s. Like
And
it's
it
a
was
lot.
very much so. It was very heavily
Yeah.
dependent on the stars of yesteryear.
Yeah, which again isn't a bad thing, but there's a point where it stops working. It's the same thing like we'll get to like with Hulk and his image. Like it worked for a really long time, like a lot longer than it should have probably. And but at some point like everything gets to its fruition, or it needs a little zhuzh or something.
Right, right, right.
And so the WCW needed a contemporary collection of wrestler. It needed new faces. Eric Bischoff, being who he is, knows that Razor and Diesel like sees how well they're doing in the WWE and is like, I take that. I want that.
Right.
Like they're
Thank you.
literally at the peak of their career, basically at
Hmm.
WWE. Like they're thriving, and he's like, what if I had that instead?
Right.
And so it's crazy because I did not know this, but so Eric Bischoff reaches out to them, but I didn't know that they had already previously worked for
Yeah.
for WCW. I had no idea. And Scott Hall said I had just previously had the worst 3 years of my life at WCW. Kevin Nash is like, I had so many flop characters there, and I was happy where I was. But
Hmm.
as we know, a lot of money gets tossed around, like and less days to wrestle, and it just became too good to pass up. And he's like, Scott said I was all about money then, and I made 1.2 million dollars in my first year with only 120 days of working
Right.
when he went back to WCW. So he was there at WCW, he went to WWE, and then on his way back only 120 days of working, more money than he'd ever made in his life. And
Working
he
half
said
the days, basically.
half the days. And he said you could maybe get that from Vince, but you needed to work 300 days for it.
Right.
Like that is I get it. It makes complete sense to me like why you would leave.
Oh,
Um
especially yeah, especially at the time, like they had like young families, like you do what you got to do. Like,
yeah. Kevin at some point which it comes up a little bit later, but Kevin says, like my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time I got the offer and I was like I'm not leaving WWE. This is my family, whatever. And she was like actually like this is your family.
yeah, actually, this
Me
is your
and your
family.
child are actually your family. And he goes, "Oh, you're right." Which, by the way, look this up. They're still married to this day. Been happily married since forever. And
Wow, love that.
love that. Love to see it. I had to look it up. I was like, I gotta know. And
Hmm.
respect. Um, but Scott gets the offer first, tells Kevin about it. This was crazy. I thought this was really genius in terms of like whoever put these clips together, but it cuts to this clip of Vince McMahon interviewing Big Daddy Cool Diesel and is basically like man, like he's just reiterating how hard it is. Like Vince is literally saying to Diesel like, "Man, between training, keeping your marriage together, is there any time for you to do anything? It must like really take a toll." And Kevin's like, "Yeah." Like,
Obviously, like what do you,
"Yeah, like you're my
what is the
boss."
response you would like me to say? Like,
Right, like you are literally my boss and you're telling me I need to work like X amount of days and I get this much money. So like you know how hard it is.
right.
So like what do you mean? But
Hmm.
which I thought was just genius editing because it's like okay, so Vince was aware. And so when Kevin approaches Vince with his contract offer from WCW, like he says, I want to stay. Can you match this offer? And Vince said, I can't. I thought this was really interesting too. And I'm curious as to what this means, like in terms of what Vince says, but he says they didn't want to go, but I wouldn't guarantee contracts in those days. So like there were contracts, but he didn't guarantee like the renewal of them, I guess.
Guarantee, like he wasn't offering like the what was it, the no cut
No cut
contracts. Like
contracts.
there was always the option to like
Bye.
on Vince's end.
Yeah,
He
and
wasn't like locking anybody down for like ever. So I think that's kind of what he was referring to. Like he didn't offer those contracts back then. Like that wasn't
right,
even on the table for his company.
right.
And
Okay.
it wouldn't be until after all of this that that
I
becomes
mean,
a more of a thing.
yeah, I mean, makes sense because he literally says from a business standpoint, they had no choice. And if I had been them, I would have taken the money.
Right.
So, no, it seems like no hard feelings, kind of, where it's like, well, I like can't come back with a better offer than this. So I guess like best of luck to you. But
And honestly, they did more than a lot of people did like when they went over. So if you
yes,
remember, like Hogan was already out of the company, but they were friends. And then he went to go work for WCW. Lex Luger was told not to give his 2 weeks notice
he was like, bye, girl.
by
Yeah.
WCW. Alundra Blaze left with the women's title. So like he has like there has been a history of wrestlers just like doing
Dipping.
him dirty.
Yeah.
So at the very least, they came to him and was like, "Hey, this is what they are offering me." Like, they brought it
Which
to him
is,
to be like, "Hey, like this is what is on the table for me. Like, what can you do?"
which is, you know,
More than most up to this point.
fully. Yeah. So that makes sense to me. Just like, it's a respect thing. And so, like, I can't fault you for doing what you did. Like, at least I knew I was aware of it. There's no shenanigans behind the back, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're all on the same page. Scott says, I felt like I sold out, but I wanted that guaranteed money to secure my kid's future, but I was not excited about the prospects. I mean, again, they're coming off of they're
Like a
doing
bad
amazingly
experience that they had.
successful. Yeah, at WWE after having 3 miserable years or however many miserable years at WCW. So like they're like, okay, well, I'm gonna be guaranteed this money, but it might not be like the best time of my life. So
Right.
like we gotta save. But this I thought was genius, and I'm glad that they rode this train like as long as possible because I thought this was so good. But Razor Ramon on his first night at WCW, enters from the crowd, and instead of jumping into the ring, he jumps on the mic and says, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." Diamond Dallas Page says when he cut that promo, it was like, whoa, it's really on now. And I mean, they played a little bit of the promo and it was like incredible.
Right.
Like incredible. I mean,
It was
Scott
just so
Hall,
smart. Like,
yeah,
just because most people were left in the dark, both wrestlers and like the audience,
yeah,
obviously. So the way that they kind of skirted around ever like addressing them, while still invoking like who they are known to be, what is it's brilliant. Like it's so smart. Like
it really is. Like they, so basically no one knew that they had signed with WCW, that they had like they left WWE, like nobody knew. So they just thought again, it was one of those moments where like someone is infiltrating from another place. Like they it created chaos, it created drama, and they were like they basically it was great too because Razor went first and basically alluded to the fact that he was going to be joined by someone else was coming, whatever. But again, you didn't know it was like coming to wrestle for WCW. You thought they were
right,
just there to mess around, create chaos. Um, Now Ryback says Razor and Diesel were my faves growing up, so when they show up at Nitro, you're like, what the hell is going on? And Road Dogg says their debut in WCW was probably the most memorable debut in our industry's history because it just personified the on-screen battle between WWE and WCW, the Monday Night Wars. Like it's just you have these two teams like literally fighting it out on TV. Like it's what people wanted to see. Like you
right,
wanted to see them put the paws on each other.
right,
So it's just like amazing. But Scott says, which I love how even though they got more money, they got time off, they got all these amazing perks, the storylines, the fame, the whatever. I feel like Scott and Kevin are still so WWE because literally Scott goes, the only reason it worked is because I'm a WWE guy. At the time, WCW had this really lame program called Where the Big Boys Play, but when we came, it blew it into a whole other story. Um, which
yeah,
was great. It had this like clip of them like walking in the crowd with like popcorns and sodas, like just like, and they literally bought legit tickets. Like they had legit tickets in the front
right.
row. They were showing the usher. It was like
Hmm.
so amazing. And I always love like a little chaos demon pot stirrer moment where you're
Right.
like not sure really what's going on. I
And
just
it couldn't
think
have worked out better because they're like they premiered within like 2 weeks of each other. Like
yes.
the fact that their contracts were up that closely together is crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. It like really worked out so well. And the fact that Razor got to tease who was coming over and
Hmm.
like it added like this whole other layer. Because if they came over together, also iconic, also amazing, very enjoyable. But the
No, but like
tease,
there's more. Like there's
mm,
more. Right.
yeah, I love that. And I also so they also go basically Scott just is Razor Ramon. He just looks like him no matter what he's doing. But Diesel like
Hmm.
is in kind of more road clothes, but you still know who he is. Like he's just such
Right.
a legend. Like he's not wearing the leather and the
Right.
the get up and all of that, but like you know who he is. But Daniel Bryan, again, who's now Bryan Danielson, no one in that time knew anything about contracts. So people are watching wrestlers going back and forth, like what? Like you didn't know what was real. Cause like it's like basically Pokemon. Like they're just trading cards back and forth, like
Right.
wrestlers. Like so and no one
100%.
understands contracts, negotiations, money, the types of things that are going on behind the scenes. So you're just kind of along for the ride, which I like better. Like I
Right.
sometimes ignorance is bliss because you just get to be involved in the storyline. And now we talk about this all the time, but we're in the age of information. So it's like I can literally find out anything pretty much, or at
Right.
least a general understanding of what's going on. Like,
Right.
it's all over Instagram if somebody's contract is coming up at WWE and they're
Oh,
like,
it's
"Are
oh,
they
it's a
sign-"
huge deal. It's debated
It's
about for like months.
yeah,
Uh,
it's basically like NFL draft. It's like it's huge.
right.
So, but this, like, you have no idea what's going on. But as we know, because technically the characters were owned by WWE, they get when Razor and Diesel go to WCW, they are dubbed the outsiders, like
Right.
temporarily. And CM Punk says it would, well, not temporarily, they end up being the outsiders.
Right.
But CM Punk says it was realistic and it was cool and exciting and refreshing to watch. I love CM Punk. He is just like amazing. He is also cool, exciting, and refreshing to watch.
Amen.
But Yeah, Bischoff, I thought this was really, really cool. Though it was all his interview was over this part where it was like just a weird, like behind the scenes clips of him doing like a photo shoot. Like
Oh,
a classic, like weird 90s photo shoot where he was
oh my God.
like it was so I literally I what did I say? It's a heinous over close of this heinous photo shoot he did.
Oh my God.
Um But Bischoff says I tried to do everything I could think of to be different than WWE. Like, so at the time, they were family entertainment. They were number one in family entertainment. The characters were all cartoonish, animated. They were clowns, garbage men, hillbillies. If they're going to be storyboard and cartoonish, I'm going to be reality based. So I think it's cool too. They just have Kevin and Scott be Nash and Hall, like their last names.
Right.
They're like, oh, if you want to have like the whoever, they're just gonna be their names.
Right.
And honestly, also Nash and Hall, amazing names. They also sound like an amazing like folk band. Like it's giving Hall and
Right.
the Oates or something.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
Like
Right.
Nash and Hall Nash and Hall, the outsiders. It paints a picture with doing the most minimal amount of effort.
Right. And it's just
It's
their names. It's
it's just
just
their
their names.
names. It's just their names. And they're the outsiders because you think they're with the WWE. It's like it's perfect. It's
Right.
so smart. Um, but literally, so Kevin Sullivan's like WWE fans would come over to watch Monday Nitro to watch quote unquote their guys beat up WCW guys. Like they were making turncoats out of people without trying or like without them even realizing. Like they were
Right.
just like, wow, I want to see like WWE like go over there and like
Mm,
make a mess out of the WCW guys. But it's like, watch
right.
out, Monday Nitro. So I mean, but this is great. Kevin Nash, I said Kevin Nash is so real for this. He tells the story. He's
So
like
funny.
so amazing. Eric is sitting there with this grin on his face, going on and on about WCW, and I just looked at him and said, "You don't get it, do you? You don't understand how pathetic WCW is." He's saying this to the man who gave him a no-cut contract for like $1 million with 120 days of working, but he goes, two guys from the WWE held off your entire roster with baseball bats today, and an entire arena bought it. That's the perception of WCW versus WWE. Two of us could take on your whole company.
Right.
Because they showed this clip of like all of the WCW wrestlers are like in the ring, and like Kevin and Scott come down from like the or come out from the crowd, and they have baseball bats, and like 15 security guards like jump into the ring and like stand around them to protect them.
And when I tell you like that sentence is essentially how they do like their whole career in their entire career feels like they are WWF guys that are just taking advantage of a WCW contract. And like
I love it.
more and more, like as WCW like falls apart, you realize that's basically what's happening.
I love
It
it.
They fully took advantage of those contracts, and as we'll learn, like really, really made out like bandits.
Yeah, and I respect it. I'll be honest. I mean, like it's just they played the game. They played the game, and I can't fault them for that. Like they really were like, well, I'm going to get the money, I'm going to get the check, I'm going to get the days, I'm going to get the contract, I'm going to do whatever, but I'm going to do it my way and in a way that feels like I'm not sacrificing an ounce of like my character, how far I've made it. Like I just think it worked well. They just did it so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. But uh they just say once again WCW is prospering from Vince's creations, like
Right.
from characters that he basically engineered. Vince says I was upset with how they debuted and ended up like that, oh, they were there. You didn't know if you thought they were still WWE, but you didn't
Well, I mean, it
know.
was the insinuation that was intentionally made. Like
Yes, fully.
it was the like you know who I am, aka
Right.
referencing characters from another show. Like you know who I am.
Yeah.
So
So Vince ends up suing Eric Bischoff, or he sues Ted Turner for using the characters, which forces Eric Bischoff's hand and he has to give up the gig. So basically, like they have to go on Monday Nitro and like he's like, okay, like, do you work for the WWF? And they're like, no.
right,
So they have to kind of like again give up the ghost, but that's fine. I mean, the lawsuit didn't change anything because Scott still acted like Razor for the most part. Like
right,
most people were like, it's still Razor Ramon. Like it
right.
really. But that's just also it's just him.
It's just his
It's
personality
his
at this
blood at
point.
this
Yeah.
point. I don't even know. But uh Scott says, I just knew that whatever we were doing, it was working because it pissed Vince off enough to sue.
Right.
And again, it's that thing where it's like, if you're number one, you shouldn't even mention number two because, like, who cares? But I also get why he did it because
Right.
the hype around it was so sensational. Not that it really, again, not that it really changed anything,
Right.
but yeah, they say they ended up settling with the lawsuit because you can't out money Turner, which we know.
Right.
He's just going to be like, here, just throw some money at it. Throw
Hmm,
some money at
hmm,
the
hmm.
problem, blah, blah, blah. But regardless, no lawsuit, settle, no settle, however it would have shaken out, Nitro starts to pull ahead. I mean, like by some pretty serious margins because they're just generating a lot of buzz. And Bischoff says, yeah, WWE used gimmicks, we're using real names. Um, the reality based angle was so strong, and wrestling fans like loved the reality and they wanted the unpredictability that reality often brings.
Right.
So, Michael Hayes, which is Doc, says if it makes you wonder and feel like you absolutely have to tune in and see what's going to happen, then someone is doing their job right.
Correct.
And I get that
Absolutely.
because I think about the how real it was to even watch the Brian Pillman and Stone Cold thing with like the
Right.
break in, and I still think about that like all the
Right.
time because
Hmm.
I was just like, what was real and what wasn't? I don't even know to this day. Like I'm still, and that's why you want to like tune in and keep watching and understand because you're like, I don't even know what is really happening here. Like,
No,
and I need
exactly.
to know like where. Again, you can't look it up. You can't be like, was this real? Was this not? I don't know. You just are living in the moment, which is amazing. But Nash and Hall, they're doing so well and they start overshadowing Hulk. This was crazy. So people are literally booing Hulk Hogan when he comes out. And he, at the time, is holding the championship belt at WCW.
Right.
They're literally booing the champion. And it's Hulk Hogan. It's not just like anybody. Like,
And that is where I think Vince was probably spot on as far as Hulk's assessment of his career,
mm,
as far as like in that gimmick. Like I think going to WCW got him a couple more years because it's like that wasn't necessarily the same audience,
mm-hmm.
but it ended up like running its course. So like it bought Hulk a couple more years in that like that red and yellow like Hulkamania shtick.
Mm-hmm.
But Vince was right. Like it had run its course. Like
Essentially,
people
yeah.
were getting tired of it.
Yeah.
So
And I think if he didn't have anywhere else to go, like there wouldn't have been this revival. So
correct.
again, I think you're spot on by saying Vince was also probably spot on, but yeah, I guess like, Hulk, it takes a lot of convincing for him to switch things up. Like he's like, there's no way it's gonna happen. But Eric Bischoff says it's time to turn, and Hulk really believed he couldn't pull it off, and it would actually be the end of his career.
Right.
But Kevin Sullivan says, look at WWE. That it is the age of the baby face is over. It's the era of the anti-hero. And while he's saying that they're showing clips of Undertaker,
Right.
who is like the quintessential
Anti-hero.
anti-hero,
Yep.
love. And he goes, this is great. Kevin Sullivan's like, a guy who's dead is the baby face. Like, come on. Like
Right.
it's timed for like a new something,
A new formula. Yeah.
a new formula. So Hulk finally agrees. This also gagged me. Sting was originally going to be the third member of NWO.
Yes.
And Hulk was basically like, no, it's gonna be me.
Right. Yeah, essentially.
Which
So
is hysterical.
Sting is like we've talked about this before. Sting, like the reason why Sting was like considered is like Sting was like the WWE or WCW guy. He was like literally like they called him the franchise of WCW because
Hmm.
like he was so steadfast in like he was the face of the company.
Hmm.
So I think to give them like the same kind of like bang that they were going for, they were going to try and turn like the face of WCW to like join this group.
Okay.
But it ended up working out that Hulk was like, actually, let's I want to get in on that, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and another little fun tidbit, Hulk has in his contract, he has basically like creative control in his like so yeah, it was a ridiculous contract that come like ends up it's a ridiculous contract for anybody. For any wrestler to have creative control over their storyline. So don't yeah. It doesn't make any sense because it is not logical. So
It's not, sorry, if anyone's not watching, I'm literally just like flabbergasted, jaw open, blinking in disbelief.
yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
Hulk has in his contract that he has creative control of the outcomes of his stories. So basically he's just like, oh, like I'm on in on that. So yeah.
Even my camera just went, what?
No, literally.
Oh my God,
And
that
that
is
it does cause
crazy.
problems for them later on.
No,
And then later on, the other wrestlers end up with similar contracts, such
girl,
as Paul, Nash.
mama.
Yeah. So it that ends up being like a really big problem for WCW, because when you have people who are actively in the story, in charge of the outcome of the story, generally they want to look the best at
Generally, they
the end
probably
of that story.
want to
So,
win.
right. So it ends up becoming a reoccurring issue later on. So fun
I
facts about that.
I can imagine how that would happen.
Right.
That is wild. And
Mm.
no offense to Hulk, but like I wouldn't give him creative control of like almost anything.
Literally anything.
Literally anything. And I mean that like in a respectful way. Like I know what he's done for wrestling, amazing, blah blah blah. But I just wouldn't do that at all.
No, it just doesn't make it's just
Mm-mm.
illogical. It just doesn't
No,
make
no, no,
sense.
no, no, no,
I
no,
was like,
no.
no, no, no. You're essentially an actor.
Ooh.
It would literally be like an actor being able to change the ending of a movie just based on their preference. Like because they thought like it wouldn't like it would just look better for them.
And like, yeah, and like, listen, ad libs here or
Sure.
there, do your thing.
Yes,
But
but that's why there are directors and
writers,
right, people who be
producers,
like, "Oh no, no, no.
new, new,
That's
new,
not
new.
what we're doing." Yeah.
Wow, that is more than a tidbit. My God, that's crazy. That's
Mhm.
literally insane. That makes so much more sense because basically Hulk goes, yeah, I called Eric Bischoff and is like, who's the third guy? And Eric was like, at the time it was Sting, but I wasn't telling anybody that. Like I was just saying, I don't know, but and Hulk's like, well, guess what? It's me. Boop.
Right.
And he and it works out, thank
Oh, it works
God.
out amazingly well. Yeah.
And Hulk does not forget to pat himself on the back at the end of the episode. He's like, thank God I thought of that,
As
which
he does.
as he does, again, it was iconic. It's amazing. We're not taking that away from him. It's just he's, you guys know, you understand.
Hogan likes
Um,
to toot his own horn. So,
he do. And Kevin goes, Kevin's like, yeah, Hulk said, whoa, brother, that money train ain't leaving without me on it, which I
yeah.
thought was really
I
funny.
love it cuz I like they like love Hulk, but they know Hulk. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's like you and I. Like, you're not gonna not roast me. I'm not gonna not roast
Right.
you because it's
Correct.
all love
Correct.
at the end of the day. Like,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
sometimes I need to be taken down a peg. Sometimes you need to be taken down a peg.
Right.
Somebody's got to do it, and it's gonna be your closest friends, like
That is
without a
true.
doubt.
Very, very,
It has
very
to
true.
be. I mean, it has to be. So that makes sense to me. I thought it was so funny.
Yeah, that was great.
Um, so they this is so good. They premiere the Bash at the Beach for Monday Nitro. I mean, it is always where the shit
Really.
hits the fan. It's always, I was like, imagine this was the same. It wasn't. Imagine this was the same Bash at the Beach with
Chris
um
Benoit and Kevin
Chris Benoit
Sullivan.
and yeah, a girl. It obviously wasn't, but could you
Still,
Bash at the Beach, man? I mean, they're
it's a
getting
time.
turnt over there. But yeah, so this not, July 1997 is when they reveal Hulk as the third man. He walks in thinking everyone is thinking that no, sorry. Hulk walks in and everyone thinks he's going to be saving Randy Savage, Macho Man, because he's getting wailed on by the outsiders.
Right.
And uh basically he just doesn't. He ends up beating up Randy more. He ends up basically joining in the massacre alongside Hulk and Nash, and the crowd tweaks.
The crowd
Like
loses it.
loses it. Hulk was like like we're not going to get out of this alive. He's like, I'm walking in and I'm like, we're not getting out of this alive. How much stuff are they going to throw? Is it going to be a riot? Like, are they going to mob me? Like, I'm just so nervous. And Gene Okerlund is like, people wanted a reason to hate Hulk, and now they had a legit reason.
Right. It worked. It worked. It worked so well. People were already tired of the shtick, so they were already like getting bored with him. He, you know, comes down to the ring, all, star spangled, woo, 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 our hero's here. They
Mm-hmm.
all get excited, and then he like rears back and then leg drops Savage, like absolutely, and then they lose it. The crowd is immediately pissed. They start
Yep.
throwing things into the ring,
Mm-hmm.
like all kinds of trash, and like it's great. Someone said the face of wrestling turns heel and basically tells everyone to stick it up their ass.
Yeah, Dusty Rhodes says that.
Ah, amazing.
Love.
Amazing. Because Hulk Hogan, it was unfathomable that he would ever turn heel. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
untouchable as a baby face. Like he was the hero in every scenario.
Yep.
So like nobody saw it coming, no one anticipated it. It just worked out well. It
Yeah.
was perfect timing.
Mm-hmm.
It
It
was
was so good. And I think that it's so interesting because even though people are tired of him, even though people have had enough, like whatever, when he came out, people were still gagged to see him. They were like, "Woo, Hulk's gonna come and
right.
save the day." Like there's still that energy. Like, yes, people were booing, they were over the gimmick, blah, blah, blah. But there were still obviously
Right.
by the reaction, people who beyond their wildest dreams did not expect this.
Right.
Like just beyond. They're wearing Hulk shirts, they're throwing garbage, they're freaking out.
Right.
Then this took me out. A fan is so bereft, so bereft.
Oh wow.
He breaks the cardinal rule and jumps in the ring.
Yeah, that is the no-no. That is you jump in the ring, you are giving the wrestlers license to assault you,
License to
essentially.
kill. And yeah, he basically gets assaulted, which sorry, what are you doing? And like
But
I love that they weren't just like get out. Like literally immediately whack, kick, punch. Like get literally physically assaulted him.
oh,
And
like
I not
Scott
upset.
Hall's like just like repeatedly kicking him in the head on the way out of the ring. Like
And not in a fake way, not like a
no no
wrestler
no no
way,
no
like
no no. Like kicking this man in the head. Like get out of
connections.
here. Yeah. Like, get
And
out of here.
it's so they feel no remorse about it as they should not. I'm sorry, you are literally crazy. It's just I mean, whatever. But Kevin literally calls him a fat drunk. He goes, "Yeah,
Right.
I had to lay somebody out, some fat drunk like jumped into the ring upset and I had to like push him out." This kid, I'll tell you, came in so determined, hot and ready like a little Caesar's pizza. He was like, "I'm trying to catch him." Sir,
Mess. What a
you
mess.
you're the one that's
Really?
gonna
You're gonna go in there with like
like
6'7" Scott Hall, 7 foot Kevin Nash, and like 300 pounds of muscle Hulk Hogan. Yeah, good idea.
that's you, all you, baby.
Yeah,
Come on now.
what a genius.
So, bye, girl. So he gets tossed. Again, and everyone is losing it. Hulk saw the reaction, knew he made the right choice. And I said, he really do be full of himself. Because this was when
He really do.
he was like,
Yeah,
I knew that it was the right call that I made to be
right.
the third person. It's like, okay, girl. Um, but when Hulk got on the mic and he said to Gene Okerlund, he goes, he really sold it. He goes, can you tell these people to shut up?
Right. He's
Oh,
like
Hulk, who is like,
he's like
take your
tell these pieces
vitamins.
of trash
He's like, tell
like
these
to
pieces in
be
the
quiet
trash
if
where
they
the
want to hear what
garbage
I
is.
say.
Swear
Like
to God. Oh
oh,
my God. I
so good.
really can't. Like, he really sells it. But
And
Randy Orton, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I was gonna say. So then this is when like Hulk Hogan like transforms into like Hollywood Hogan, he like turns up into this like super stuck up, just like gross version of himself. They're like, oh, like he's too good for wrestling. He went off to Hollywood and like made it big. And
Love.
he just comes back to like just grace you all with his presence when he feels like it. Like
I'm honestly,
amazing.
I'm so into that angle because one, it's a little bit true. Two, I think because that character could be just a character in and of itself, like
Right.
the stuck-up Hollywood. Because you know who I'm thinking of is what's his name from AEW with the Burberry scarf.
MJF.
Yes, like it's that energy where it's like I'm too good for you, but I'm gonna come like be here and grace you
Right.
with my presence and like la la
Uh-huh.
la. And I know he's going through like a whole genesis right now, but I like that could be a character in and of itself,
Right.
but it's better because it's Hulk and there's a little bit of truth to it because
Right.
he literally did leave wrestling. He's doing
Go off to
a
Hollywood.
show,
Yep.
Hollywood, la la la, like Parade in Disney for me. So it's just more it's believable. It's just
Right.
delightful. Yeah.
And they said like it worked out better because it had to be like a WWE guy that was going to be the
Yes.
third member.
And I
Uh,
agree with that.
right. And Hulk was like the WWE guy. So it fit so perfectly.
Yeah, because at first when they mentioned Sting, I was like, well, that would have been freaking awesome. I would have loved to have seen
Yeah,
Sting
but what
with
they end up doing with Sting after this, so essentially for the next like couple months, like Sting is like in the thralls of the WCW NWO like battle. And then eventually they do this thing where like it starts to become like in question, like Sting's like loyalty, and then he just disappears. He stops wrestling. He
no.
like yeah, he stops wrestling. This is when he like goes into like the black the crow like makeup.
Yes.
He starts like hanging around the rafters like for and he doesn't wrestle in a match for over a year. So for over a year, he's like basically like coming in and like and it's like Sting is equal opportunity like I'll beat up whoever I please. So like
Oh, love.
the question of like his loyalty gets questioned all the way up until he finally ends up in a match against Hulk Hogan at Starrcade in 97. So for from basically the formation of the NWO a couple months later up until like the end of 1997, he's just like this like brooding like and he's like another anti-hero to like the NWO's like chaos.
I love
Like
that.
he's basically just like watching the two companies like feud and it's just sitting like above them all just like hmm like just taking it in. He's just like and then he just picks and chooses his spots. He like comes down. He ends up carrying like a bat and just like doesn't say a word. Doesn't say a word. He would go down like and confront like WCW wrestlers. Like he'd clear out NWO. He'd like point his bat at the chest of whoever the WCW person was, and then he'd toss them the bat and turn around with his arms like this. Like, do it if you're gonna do it. Like if you don't trust me, go ahead. Like hit me with the bat. And like he would do that for like months. Like he would just show up, like wreak
Wow.
havoc, clear the NWO out, like point somebody like directly in the chest, like hard, like shove them in the chest, and just be like, go ahead and do it. Yeah, it was crazy,
That
so
is
crazy.
amazing.
So what they end up doing with Sting is like just
Better.
equally as cool as this
Oh,
like would have been, but
that is so
I
hot.
think it worked out the best. Yeah,
Okay, first of all, major fan of the opera vibes. Love.
very much so.
I love Sting so much. I would love like I don't want to spoil too much, but I would love to watch like his like a documentary about Sting because I just like I
Oh, I
think
got
he
you
is
covered. We got
so
this.
work. I think he is so cool and that character is amazing. Like what
So
an
cool.
amazing
Hmm.
idea. Love that. That's what I'm saying. Like just do something like crazy and ridiculous where you don't even know what that is. Like he's just the rafter creature. Like
Right.
love that. Like
Yeah.
they're just
At one point, he has
limitless.
like a literal vulture.
What?
Like, he's just
Okay,
like
me for
he just
real.
has an actual vulture. Like, and you're just like, what
Where
the
did
hell is going on?
stop? I just, yeah, yeah. 10 out of 10. So again, everything worked out the way it was supposed to be because at first I was like, okay, that would be cool, but it worked so much better this way. So much better this way. But yeah, so Hulk is now in this like black attire, Hollywood Hulk, blah, blah, blah. Daniel Bryan was so real for this. He was like, the day Hulk went dark was the first time I had been interested in him for years.
Right.
Like he's like, I honk shoe, don't care about Hulk. Like if he's on the screen, I'm flipping
Hmm.
elsewhere. Like so honest, and I just love that.
Daniel Bryan's
Um,
very, I want to say like, not necessarily like he didn't like, he's under the school of wrestling that is like Bret Hart's. You know what I mean? Your
I
Bret
see.
Hart, your
He
Owens,
has
like,
that energy. He really does.
mhm. He's a
And
much more technical wrestler, and Hulk was
yes.
not.
Right. And I think I will say though, I think he's just like he's so honest, but not in like a malicious way. He's just like, well, that's the truth.
Right.
Because I don't think he was saying that to be a dick. I think he was just saying that
No.
to be like, I mean, this was it really it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But
Hmm.
at the same time, it's kind of like I literally didn't care about Hulk at all until this moment.
Right.
So but the Rock says he was the most amazing heel in sports entertainment had ever seen. I mean, they were literally spray painting the title belt and people's bodies with the New World Order. Like,
Spray paint.
look,
They were tagging everything.
they were tagging everything, and this is Hulk Hogan again. Like, this is mind blowing. Who's telling people like a few months ago, like, take your vitamins,
Say your
like
prayers, blah
say
blah
your
blah.
prayers, yep, eat your vegetables, tuck your little sister in the bed, like whatever. I don't know. It
Yes.
just it's so amazing. And like you said, Scott Hall also, affirms like all due respect to Singh, but it wouldn't have worked. We needed a WWE guy. And so Nitro starts smoking WWF in ratings, like
Yeah.
really just hanging them out to dry and totally understandable. And this is when this is when they do
Here we
the
go.
introduction of fake Razor and fake Diesel. Girl, I cannot understand whose idea was this because we find out it wasn't JR's. He was just the guy chosen to sell it, which
Right.
God bless, that is so upsetting. And he literally was like, it was just a bad idea. Like
Right.
it was he literally says it felt like a fart in church, which is so
Oh my
funny.
God, so good. And like just a little like a preface for you all in our regular show. We started watching after Scott Hall and Kevin Nash had made their way to WCW. So
Yep.
Kelsey has never seen the real Razor Ramon and Diesel. Never
Until
once. We
until
have
this episode.
only now just kind of gotten the like what the hell happened
Yeah.
because we have just been subjected to fake Razor and Diesel for way too long, way too
Fully way too long. And it was first of all, they teased them way too long for what they were.
right,
Which, if you watch our regular show, you know how irritated that made the both of us. It's like,
right.
just please, like, let's just get this over with. But I truly, again, hi, new to wrestling, I did not understand how bad it really was. Like, I knew it was bad, but I
Hmm.
didn't understand how bad it really was until I watched this because I was like, I didn't know how big they were. I had no idea. Like
Oh,
I
they
was
were
like I didn't
huge,
realize they
huge,
were
huge, huge.
these massive stars who left basically at the pinnacle and now are doing amazing things at this other network who they're also compete like there were so many more moving parts with that I didn't understand until
Yeah,
now and now I like really understand that this was like such a heinous idea. Like just the
and like
worst
going
idea.
back to like insulting the fans' intelligence, like
Girl.
this was
Uh
bad.
and you know what I would have even liked and it's still not a good idea, but I probably would have liked better is almost if they like spoofed them instead of
Right,
made it serious, like, no, we're literally these are the new characters, like made it
like
funny,
goofy. Yeah,
goofy, like insult, like when they do like geriatric Hulk and Randy Savage, like do something where they're
right.
dumb or not, I don't
Or
want to say
like
dumb, but you know what I
or
mean,
like
like a
go and like
joke,
bury the characters, like you know what I mean, like make them lose all the time, make them whatever, like it just
make
it
them
was
ditzy
so
or yeah, the Fall Guys, like I don't know, just something like I yeah, it just was a bad, just all around bad idea, and I will never understand why they did it. And but it's really funny because, like we said, they teased it a lot. They're teasing it a lot. They're teasing a lot. And Kevin Nash is like, we're sitting there, me and Scott, and they're like, all right, like at WCW and WCW executives are like, all right, so like, what is this? You're going back? Like, they're like, what the heck is, because
like what is the deal? What is the
WWE is
deal? Yeah.
talking about reintroducing Diesel and Razor, and they're like, we're not going anywhere. Like, we're literally sitting right in front of you. Obviously, we're not debuting on WWE tonight. Like, what? And they're like, going and going and goes, all right, what do you want? You want more money? And they give him a contract with like money, and Kevin's just like, Sure. Yeah,
Sure.
that's exactly what I wanted. They cracked me up because they
Oh,
were
they're
like,
so funny because they were
okay,
so dumb. Like it was so dumb. Like
so
you
dumb.
literally have these people under contract. So to either way, so to break the contract, you either had to have a buttload of money
Mm,
coming your way, or they were just gonna do what the contract said because they were making a buttload of money. So
girl.
like they panicked, just sheer panicked, shoved two new, even more expensive contracts in front of the two of them. And of course, why would you not sign on the dotted line? Literally, you are getting a pay raise on top of your pay raise. Like
Girl.
that's crazy. That is crazy.
So wild. And like the way that Kevin just tells the story where he was just like, that is what I wanted. Thank you. And he just signs it like is
Like,
so funny because me for real, I would have been like, mm-hmm. Thank you. Actually, maybe like a little more. I don't want to be
right.
like, but you know, just
Oh,
this. Like it is so funny. But and then they come out and Kevin's like, I was so flabbergasted, I just walked away. Like I
right.
just was like, this is just the
This is
silliest thing I've ever
crazy.
seen, and he just walks away from watching it. JR, like I said, says it was not well received. Daniel Bryan, it was so stupid. Like
So
again,
stupid.
we know.
JBL, who is Justin Hawk Bradshaw,
Yes.
JBL. He's like,
Love
I'm
to see
not
him.
sure that what we did didn't just make people want to watch the real Razor and Diesel. Like he's just like,
Big T.
right,
Big T, because even me, I was like, well, okay, who are they? Like, having never seen it. So then I
right.
was like, I want to go back and like watch the actual people because what is this? But so yeah, as a result of them debuting fake Razor, fake Diesel, whatever, la la la, now the WCW is like really eating. Like now they're really tearing up the ratings. And Lex Luger, I thought this was such a good point. It almost seemed like a precursor to reality television because you could see how perceived reality can create tremendous interest. Because now they're talking about NWO and what they're doing
Mhm.
and like how they're blurring the lines between what's real and what's not.
I
Which
mean,
again, like we're
at
talking
this
about, we
point,
love to
we
see.
did have like the real world, like that was already out,
Yeah.
but like
So,
reality TV was very new.
right. And
Like,
I think that it was like they're kind of getting into that like flow a little bit or like catching that current a little bit because it's
right,
like like Doc said like you had to tune in to see what was going to happen because you were just like it was so crazy. It wasn't just
right,
like wanted to see this match. You wanted to see if whose car windows NWO was smashing him with a bat for no reason.
right.
Like you wanted to see like what you just wanted to see what they were going to do next. They start um taking like the fans backstage more, like the cameras
Mhm.
are following NWO backstage. It just seemed very unscripted. Like they like destroyed this like trail. They take them back to like where the trailers are, where the wrestlers are getting ready. There's like a brawl, then they like get in this limo to drive away. Randy Savage jumps on the limo, like
Yeah, it's
skirts around the
crazy.
corner. They said that the residents in Orlando watching it on TV literally called 911 because they thought it was real.
Right.
They thought there was like real fights like breaking out, real people injured, like it was a whole thing. And they said the switchboard at Disney was lighting up because they also thought it was real. They were like calling like, "Hi,
What's going
you're on
on?
you're on Disney property and it looks like there's like a literal fist fight happening in the parking lot. Like and somebody's car windows are being destroyed and the tires flat. And like y'all good over there or
Right. What's going on? What's going
yeah,
on?
I mean, and Kevin Zalman's like, I mean, these people produce movies and they believed it.
Right.
Like I knew we were doing okay because like we were literally gaslighting the people who make movies for a living, who do acting, and like
Hmm.
they still were like, hello,
Right.
crazy. Um, Dean Malenko, I did not know this, but Dean Malenko says that Eric took the idea for NWO from New Japan Pro Wrestling. There was an organization with an organization that kind of like created a moment of turmoil, and but no one had ever seen it done in American wrestling. So he brought the idea over and like really made it a completely different organization basically within WCW,
Correct.
which is
Like
crazy.
very much so. Like it had like it very much so felt like its own thing.
Yeah.
Because as like the show, as like NWO's like presence becomes more felt.
Mm-hmm.
They start like it starts like slow, like they start like demanding like TV segments, and then they start demanding that like they have their own announcers, they get their own referee,
Oh my
then they
God.
end up getting their own pay-per-view. Like it was like a slow like build where they just kept kind of like demanding more and like demanding more, and like because they were having their way with everybody, it just kind of like
Mm,
happened that the NWO was set up to be its own entity.
right. It is really interesting. I will say the vignettes that they create, these like black and white, gritty, quick cuts, it's like whatever, really ate. Like
Right.
I love
Mm-hmm.
those. Like I mean, it's really really cool to see. It to me, it's fresh, it's different, it's exciting. It's you just want to. Booker T says you wanted to be in on it with them. You just want to. It just felt so interesting. You just wanted to be in on whatever they were getting into. Um, and then like the bad guys became the good guys. Like
Right.
you wanted them to succeed. Like you wanted to see, or you didn't necessarily want them to succeed, but you were rooting for them because you were interested in them, you were engaged in them, you cheered for them when they came out to wrestle. Like it was just fascinating. um but yeah, it was NWO was doing so well, it started to grow, but specifically at first with only former WWE wrestlers, which I kind of liked because it again made this flavor of like at like could they potentially like is it the WWE fighting WCW with their own organization? Like it
Mm-hmm.
still creates that tension, that like energy of like the Monday Night Wars. Like it worked really well, I feel
Right.
like.
No,
I
definitely. Because it just kind of added to like just the chaos of it all. Because you just didn't know like
yeah,
who was gonna end up like, because not only did you not know who's gonna end up like coming from WWE to WCW, now you didn't know who was gonna go from like WCW to the NWO. Like it was a whole other
right.
like you didn't know where anybody was or where their like allegiances lied.
Yeah. It's interesting because I kind of understand. So, because Chris Jericho talks about it really starts to create a rift in the WCW because it gets NWO gets so big and so popular. Even Eric Bischoff ends up becoming part of NWO because, he just can't help himself.
Right.
But Chris Jericho talks about how it creates a rift, and I so understand this because he says all anyone talked about was NWO. Doing anything against them was a waste of time because you knew you were just going to get massacred. And there's this clip of him literally like he gets, he's in a match against somebody in the NWO. He gets, his ass handed to him and he just he takes a chair and just like destroys it against the side of the ring and is like I literally at the top of his lungs like I'm sick of it. And it felt so real. Like I did not feel like it obviously like he knew he was gonna lose, but there was such an energy to it that felt very like from the heart where he was like I'm just like so tired of this. um and Kevin says all the other wrestlers hated us. It was very disruptive in the locker room because like you just hated those guys, but at the same time, then a lot of people were like, okay, well, if I can't win, if I'm against the NWO, I'll just join them. So
Right.
then a lot of people were turning to NWO. Like even Randy Savage ends up becoming a member of the NWO, even though he was the one who was beat at the very beginning of the
He's one of
NWO's
the early
organization.
ones that switches.
Is he?
Hmm.
Work. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I think it is like I don't know how I would feel. I mean, when you're caught up in like the rush of it, if you're like a fan, I think you might be like fascinated to have it grow and like take over or whatever. But at the same time, like I don't know if I would have preferred it to stay just a threesome. Like I don't know.
It ended up getting like way too big.
For
So
sure, for sure.
um there was like no discrepancies as far as like who could join. Like at one point they were just like adding everybody, and it
Yeah,
did create like, see, the thing that with the NWO is it felt like they had all of this like planning to get them to like that point, and
right.
then there was no plan for what happens after that.
For the
So like, do
longevity.
they like become their own company? Do you just give them their own whole separate show? And what does that even look like? If they're not feuding with WCW, then what is it then?
Right.
Right. So like it just felt like there was no end game to it. They were just kind of like riding it as far as they could like ride it. But what it ended up doing in the long run is it basically cemented the people that were on top were always going to be on top. So Hulk Hogan, Nash, Hall, Sting, Flair were always going to be on top. They
Mm-hmm.
were the main eventers. That's how that was. So
Mm-hmm.
if you hadn't ascended to that main event level yet, you weren't getting there. So your Chris Benoit's, your Eddie Guerrero's, your Chris Jericho's, your Dean Malenko's, your Rey Mysterio's all get sick of it. And that is why it is a huge reason why those competitors leave. Like they just were like, oh well, I can't, I'm never going to break that glass ceiling, so there's no point in staying here. So that's when those wrestlers end up going to the WWF
Oh,
because they were a company that was looking towards younger, faster, more technical wrestlers.
wow.
Yeah,
That makes sense. And while you were saying that, I remembered from the Chris Benoit episode when I think it was Dean said, like, we knew there was only a certain level of fame we could achieve at WCW
right,
because of like, he says something about like the ceiling or whatever. And
right,
I was like, I thought he just meant because they were not, which isn't even true. I thought they were just like a not as popular organization. But at that time, the ratings were technically larger.
right.
But that makes sense to me because I didn't really
Yeah,
that wasn't the reason I had perceived it. Okay, that is
yeah. So
crazy.
especially like like your Hogan's who can decide the outcome of his storylines, and
Oh my
that
God.
it ended up just like holding a lot of people down. Like the only person that was like relatively new that ended up like going up the ladder was Goldberg, um, who later on,
Okay. I was like,
Goldberg, um, but generally like it just prevented all of these other people from ever getting a break because if it wasn't aiding the NWO like storyline, like it wasn't really like viewed as important. And then the extra like how do I phrase it? Like caveat to all this was when Eric Bischoff joined the NWO. So like the person who's in charge of the show is now being super buddy buddy with all of these people with guaranteed contracts
mm,
and whatever. So like even if you
girl,
had like grievances and gripes, and like who are you talking to?
that is
Your boss
so
is literally just sitting in there with everybody that you have a gripe with. Very unprofessional.
wow. So unprofessional. I was literally thinking that. I was like, Eric Bischoff, like,
Oh, and he loves to
he
like
loves, I was just gonna say,
he
he
thought he was so cool, like
cool with his
hanging out
leather
with the bad
jacket.
guys. Me.
Girl,
Like, listen, he shot himself in the foot doing that.
fully.
Like,
He
shot himself in the foot. Because you now became a boss that is no longer approachable. Like, who's gonna come to you? Who's going
or
to come to you?
respectable because you are in WCW, but basically in the essentially a virus organization taking over WCW. And it took you too. And so now it's like, what are we
Who?
even doing here? Like,
Right,
I don't, it is
right.
so weird. And I just know like Eric loved to be like one of the boys. Like I was
Oh,
gonna
you could
say,
tell it's written all over his
he
face.
he's
Like
one of those
he's
people that feels like, oh, he's so confident, but he has the lowest self-esteem you could possibly imagine and has to do all these things to like be perceived as cool.
I agree. I
Right?
agree.
Like he just has that energy where he's like, oh yeah, I can't, that's such a cool idea, right? And then he's like, right?
Right?
Like,
Like,
ew! Oh my God, gross. Anyway, yeah, that was really, I'm sorry. That is so unprofessional and so stupid. It makes no sense. Whatever. But
right. And I
like
just
NW,
like there just never was an end game for the NWO. There was no like once they like there was no like battle for, like supremacy. There was no like there was nowhere to go. They just
they were steamrolling
added the
everybody.
entire roster, and then you're like, okay. It got to the point where there were so many of them that they ended up splitting the NWO into two separate factions. There was the Wolf Pack, and then there was like the
No,
regular like black and white NWO.
girl.
So it's just like there was really it just became so convoluted because there was no like way to end this. There was no like WCW turning the tide and like
Which
getting
they
the
should have
win, or you know what I
they should
mean?
have done that though. Because to be
Agreed,
honest,
because you they discredited the entire WCW like roster by feeding
yes.
them to the NWO for years.
Yep.
Why would anybody root for them or believe that they were a threat to anything if for the last 4 years or whatever they've just been fed to the NWO? Like, of course not.
Yep.
You're not gonna buy it at all. Like, it's stupid.
And to be honest, it's bad for the NWO at the end of the day because then it's like they're
Who are
okay,
they
so like
rivaling
who are they
against?
who are they really if fully you
Rebel.
have
You
no
took the cause. You
you
took
took
the cause.
you literally took the cause. You have no one to fight. You have no storyline. You're not fighting with anyone. You're just being a menace to society, which was originally the only idea, which I was fine with. If you want to have like three little chaos makers stirring up trouble, fighting, win some, lose some, ba ba ba, but they have a cult following, work. Love that. But
Right.
now it's like it's literally it got too big. I'm sorry. And like whatever. Um, but speaking of the technical wrestlers that WWE is trying to bring in, the Chris Benoits, the Dean Malenkos, the Eddie Guerreras, Vince McMahon starts a creative rebrand, i.e., the Attitude Era, and it became for adults instead of a family program, which we are currently watching the beginnings of. I did get some insane spoilers in, and I cannot believe how far we're going to go. Like, I
Oh,
just,
you
there's
have
so
no
many,
idea.
there
And
were
that's
things
just
in
like the tip of
here.
the iceberg.
I was like, the thing with, because we just met China in our other show, Love.
Hmm.
Um, there was a thing with Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and China on stage with like hot dogs, and it was like
Mm.
weenies
Yeah,
and
yeah,
well,
yeah.
China, what do you have? And she has like a freaking bratwurst. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's so over the top. I can't wait to get there. But
No, it's gonna be great.
in lieu of that clip, Triple H says, we'll make people look at us one way or another. I don't care what we have to do, even if it's horrible. And CM Punk's just like, listen, millions of people were watching wrestling and it was amazing. Ryback says that he was taping episodes. He goes, I'd be up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I would watch, WCW, and then I would go back and watch WWE on tape. Brodus Clay was like, I was channel serving. I could not go back and forth fast enough. I was just like all over the place. It was so cool. And Sean Waltman says it took our industry and made it hot again. It made it really, really cool. Biggie says it was just so different and fresh. Honestly, thought it was the coolest thing in wrestling at the time. So them all competing. So Attitude Era versus the NWO era. I mean, just kind of crazy.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. Um, because if it's one thing Vince does great, it is like, oh, that's the idea. I'll make it perfect. Like I will.
Fully, he adds structure to it. I was
Right.
gonna say, like, I understand the chaos maker, demon, whatever, love to stir the pot. Love that energy. We know this. But I also understand the idea for there to be structure because without structure, things just fall apart. And I'm not
Right.
saying like it should be limited, but there should be like
Some separation between
yes,
like what you're doing and your role on.
fully.
Mhm.
Like there are people who are here, there are people who are here, there are people who are like mid-level with that person. Like there's just
Right.
there are
And like the thing is like you'll see like Vince McMahon becomes a character on screen,
yes.
but he doesn't, and like he will like align himself like with wrestlers throughout, his time being an on-screen character, but he is like onto himself like the bad guy. Like he's at everybody doesn't want to deal with him unless you are directly benefiting from whatever evil benevolence he is like bestowing on you, like if you happen to be like the character benefiting from that, but like in no way, like the thing is like, and you talk to anybody who's like come up through WWE, it's like the buck stops at Vince. Like if an idea goes like so far and Vince is like, don't love that, then they have to go and like rework it into something
Yep.
that is like usable, and you need that kind of like back and forth
Yes.
to like settle on something that is palatable for a large audience.
Fully.
When you are just like the one like one you're very involved in the storyline and you have created a conflict of interest for yourself, it just is not going to work. It's just not.
No, and I agree with that, and I feel like you need as frustrating as it is, like if it's you in the moment who has this idea that gets like shot down or like things have to change for
Hmm.
you or pivot, whatever. You do need that person because like it's so obvious, but it's like there's so many different perceptions if you have a huge audience, and you need to try and cater to as many of those people as possible. So if you do the same thing over and over again, and you've seen this where like they literally had to do a rebrand because they were doing the same things, like Triple H said, it just felt gimmicky, it felt played out, felt passe. Like there needs to be new ideas, pivots, changes,
Right.
structure, people to say no, people to say yes. Like it just makes sense even if it is frustrating sometimes. Like,
Right.
yeah, like I don't know, it makes sense to me why WWE ends up having longevity. Like
Right.
because I feel like Eric Bischoff and like WCW were going for like shock value, which always works in the moment, like for ratings and stuff. But you
Hmm.
also need that like consistency of like
Well,
a
you need
current
a good story, something that's gonna
yes.
like that has, an actual story structure, beginning, middle, end.
Yep.
Uh,
And
you need
longevity.
right, and you need to not have a company where the inmates are essentially running the asylum,
Oh,
uh,
boop boop.
because you can't tell people that have creative control to do anything, to do
Mm,
anything.
yeah.
So even if like you wanted to change the story, like if now that you've given these people all of this control, like if they don't want to do it, that's it. It's dead in the
Yep.
water. Like they're just gonna do whatever makes them look the best, and that's what happened. Like that is exactly what happened.
Yep, it's so true. And I feel like what you said about like the NWO not having an ultimate direction, I do feel like Vince always has a bigger picture. Like there's
Hmm.
always a different goal for something. Like there's always like cuz if even if you think about it where we're at in the show right now, like the fact we're coming up on a year
Oh my
of
god.
doing the other podcast, which is so crazy. Ahmed Johnson and Farouk are still beefing, and the beef is still fresh, like kind
Right.
of. Like we're talking about, there's debates we talk about on the other show about like Farouk's motives and whatever, but there's it's had longevity, it's had changes, it's had twists and turns, like, and that's just one storyline, and there's so many. Stone
Right.
Cold and Bret Hart, there's been
Right.
so many,
They had
and it's
one they
still
had
going.
one match through like two pay-per-views ago, and like the feud has just been kind of it has been building and building and building. And this is where the WWF gets really good at their kind of like long-term storytelling. This is like the era which they start like really getting it right. And there is a structure, there is an end goal to everything. And the
Yes.
WCW was just so chaotic and there were so many factors as far as like Eric Bischoff ends up getting like removed from his position, and then they bring in other people, and then they're
Mm,
like Ted Turner ends up like his company ends up merging with like AOL. AOL is not really a big wrestling fan. They have to like deal with that, and now there's just like a whole like it just became like so chaotic, and like the inmates were running the asylum, so it was just like there was no winning there. It was not.
yeah.
You need that person to filter all of that through and to ultimately like take responsibility for when things aren't going well.
That's also really true. Really, really true. Because if you are the one dictating the direction, you're also the one that has to take responsibility when the direction that you dictated is incorrect. Like,
Correct.
whoever's idea it was to do fake Razor and fake Diesel, like that was just a
It was
flop
probably Vince,
Arella.
but like,
It was probably Vince, like flop Tina, like so bad.
mhm.
But I mean, yeah, there's like we said a million times, there's a reason that WWE has such longevity. And it's these kinds of like little things that end up adding up to be huge, important factors in why they survive. Um, but this episode ends with Michael Hayes saying, you cannot like Eric Bischoff, you cannot like the people that left WWE to go to WCW, and you can hate them until the day you die, but you cannot deny the success and the role that they played for all of us. And I think that is no truer words, perfectly encapsulates the energy of the Monday Night Wars. But there's more to the Monday Night Wars that we will leave at a brief pause for now so that not too many things are spoiled for us as we could venture forth on our journey on our other podcasts in the Attitude Era. But we'll probably circle back at some point depending. But next week we're going to be rounding off the tea of this time with a look into the rise and fall of ECW, which I am psyched about.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be good.
Psyched about. It'll most likely be a two-parter. I'm just
Yeah, I
saying
was
that
gonna
right
say,
now.
yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, it's a longer documentary. So I most likely it will be a two-parter.
Especially if you know us and how much we love to gab. Especially about
Amen.
ECW. I'm
Oh, amen.
so excited to watch this and discuss, girl.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for another episode of the New to Wrestling Podcast After Dark. Stay tuned. This week we are going to be covering WrestleMania 13. And that's going to be super exciting. And then next
So
weekend
exciting.
we are going to cover the rise and fall of ECW. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and we will catch you next time.
We'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.